my jaw hit the floor.
I mean, better survival instincts than Bella Swan.
If I had to choose between a vampire and a cop, the choice is obvious. Hello and welcome to the Faded Wildflower Crochet. My name is Rachel, and if you've been watching my channel, then you will know that I did a review of the first 2 books in the Crochet Mystery Series. Now, it turned out that I just wasn't really enjoying the series. There were parts about the books that were just not good for my mental health. I was a little bit disappointed because I love the concept of reading a book with you guys that involves yarn, involves crochet, and I wanted to continue, but for the sake of my mental health, I decided not to continue on that series. But I had so many comments, and I mean so many comments from you guys recommending a new series to me called the Vampire Knitting Series. At first, I was like, well, I'm not really sure because I don't knit. I am only a crocheter, and I didn't know if anyone would care about hearing my opinions about a knitting book when I'm a crocheter, but I think I was just kind of overthinking it a little too much. And plus, I found out that the 3rd book in the series is called Crochet and Cauldron. So maybe we will end up getting some crochet representation in this series. I don't know. We will see. So I thought that for today's video, instead of me just sitting here and telling you about the book, we could do a little reading vlog. Reading vlogs are some of my favorite things to watch. So basically what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be reading the book. I'm actually going to be listening to it because I found the audiobook on Hoopla. I'm going to be listening to it while I'm in the car line. I'm going to be listening to it while I'm crocheting, of course. And I will be giving my opinions and kind of giving you updates all throughout. I thought that that could be a really fun thing for us to try here. So I think first, before we get started, let's go ahead and read the synopsis of this book together because I have no idea what this is about. All I know is it's about a girl in a knitting shop and there's vampires, which I mean, sign me up. That sounds good already. But let's go ahead and read the synopsis. Okay, I've got my laptop here. And we're going to be reading from Goodreads, just the basic synopsis of this book to see what we're getting ourselves into. So it says, Vampires Who Knit, a troublemaking witch who killed Granny, and is she really dead? Ooh, okay. So there is a mystery involved. At a crossroads between a cringeworthy past, Todd the Toad, and an uncertain future, she's not exactly homeless, but it's close. Lucy Swift travels to Oxford to visit her grandmother. With Gran's undying love to count on and Cardinal Woolsey's, okay, Gran's knitting shop to keep her busy, Lucy can catch her breath and figure out what she's going to do. Except it turns out that Gran is the undying, or at least the undead. But there's a death certificate and a will leaving the knitting shop to Lucy. And a lot of people going in and out who never use the door, including Gran, who is just as loving as ever and prone to knitting sweaters at warp speed late at night. What exactly is going on? When Lucy discovers that Gran did not die peacefully in her sleep, but was murdered, she has to bring the killer to justice without tipping off the law that there's no body in the grave. Between a hot 600-year-old vampire and a dishy detective inspector, both of whom always seem to be there for her, Lucy finds her life getting more complicated than a triple cable cardigan. The only one who seems to know what is going on is her cat. Or is it her familiar? Okay, it sounds like a lot of fun. It does sound like there is a mystery involved. And it does sound like there's going to be some interesting characters, maybe a love triangle. We'll see. So I am going to start listening to this book now. I'm actually about to go pick up my daughter from school. I'm going to listen in the car line. And then I will just check in with you guys throughout. So I will see you once I'm a little bit into the Knitting Vampire Club. What am I getting myself into? Hello guys, it is the next day. I'm already 33% of the way through this book. I'm absolutely blowing through it. I actually had to stop myself from listening to more of it last night. So I was like, I need to check in. So I have to tell you the wildest thing first is that I'm sitting here listening to the book, minding my own business when they're talking about a piece of stationery. And she says it was etched with faded wildflowers. My jaw hit the floor. I have never heard faded and wildflower together as a phrase, except for my silly little business name that I came up with in my 20s. That means nothing, by the way. People have asked me before. It's just a name I came up with, and now people know me by that name, so I just have stuck with it all of these years. But I was so surprised to hear that in this book, and I feel like it's a sign that this book and I were meant to be. At least I hope so. I'm taking it as a good sign. Let me grab my crochet and I will work on another project for another video as I talk to you about this book. So our story starts with Lucy, who was a little bit down on her luck. She lost her job and then she found out her boyfriend was cheating on her. And in the very first chapter of this book, to reference the fact that her boyfriend cheated on her, she says he stuck his salami in someone else's sandwich. So that really sets the tone for some of the writing. It is a little bit silly, but I don't mind it. It's kind of funny. So Lucy's dad is American and her mom is British. And both of her parents are archaeologists. So she has been with them on an archaeological dig in Egypt. But she is planning to go visit her grandma. And this is her mom's mom, who is British. So this happens in England, which I was really excited to find that out. I don't think I realized that by reading the synopsis. Maybe I missed something, but this series happens in England. And so she goes to her grandma's knitting shop. So her grandma owns this shop, and then she lives in the apartment above it. And her grandma's name is Agnes. And so she goes to the shop, and she sees a sign on the door that's saying, "We're closed until further notice." And she's so confused. She's like, my grandma would never just close the shop. Like, what is going on? So she goes next door to this little tea shop and she asks the owners there, "Do you know what's going on with my grandma?" And they were like, "We're so sorry to tell you this, but your grandma passed away in her sleep a few weeks ago and we couldn't get a hold of you. I guess they don't have service or email or anything." I'm not sure what year this is supposed to take place in, but I think they reference like text messages and email, but nobody could get a hold of them apparently at this job site. So she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sad. I didn't know." And she goes into the shop, and to keep herself busy, she decides to kind of tidy up the shop. And that is when she finds her grandma's glasses, and they're broken. And then she looks down on the ground and she sees blood around the broken glasses. And she's like, "Wait a minute. I thought they said my grandma died in her sleep peacefully. Why would there be blood and broken glasses?" And the knitting shop is also kind of a mess, and her grandma would never leave it that way. So Lucy's kind of like suspicious, like, did my grandma really die in her sleep? Like, what? Like, and why did nobody tell me? She's really upset about it. But as she's thinking about this, all of a sudden, this man shows up. And of course, this man is very attractive and pale. And I think we see where this is going. His name is Rafe. And he's like, "Yeah, I knew your grandma. I'm so sorry to hear about her passing. So sorry for your loss. Let's get together another time and talk about this." And she's kind of suspicious of him because he just showed up. And she's like, "I know I locked that door. How is he all of a sudden in here?" But she decides, he's really kind and seems really genuine. And so she decides to meet up with him at a later time to talk about the grandma's death. So the next day, Lucy has to go down to her grandma's lawyer's office to find out what's going on with her will, find out, what's even happening with her grandma's estate and all of that. And that is when she finds out that the grandma is leaving everything to her. And this includes the knitting shop. And she specifically tells Lucy, "Do not sell it. I want you to continue to run it as a knitting shop. You will understand later." And so Lucy is kind of like, "Well, I'm only 28 years old. I don't feel like I want to run a knitting shop." And she doesn't knit. So this is kind of a huge point of the book, is that her grandma loved knitting. Knitting was obviously her grandma's career. It was her whole life. And she tries to teach Lucy how to knit, but Lucy's really bad at it. And then she also just kind of keeps emphasizing the point that she's like, "I'm just too young to own a knitting shop," which I thought was kind of funny because I feel like a lot of people in their 20s nowadays would absolutely love to run a knitting shop. But like multiple times in the book, and multiple characters will be like, "Oh, Lucy, you're too young to run a knitting shop," which I don't know, like 27, 28. I don't feel like that's too young to run a knitting shop. But I guess I'm not sure when this book was written. I should look that up. but I know that knitting and crocheting and all of that have been associated with granny hobbies for the longest time. So I'm sure that's what they're referencing, but I thought that was really funny. So another thing that happens is this woman shows up, and I can't remember what this woman, I guess she's like a realtor or something like that. And she's like, oh, I talked to your grandma about selling this. Like, I think she wants to sell it. But Lucy obviously knows that she's lying because she got this letter from her grandma telling her, do not sell it. And so Lucy's getting really mad at this woman, and she sees like sparks start to come out of her hands. And she's like, oh, it's just the static electricity. But I don't think it's a static electricity. I think something else is going on. But then another thing that happens is that she finds this cat. I think the cat like gets into her apartment somehow, and she's like, oh, this poor cat, I have to take care of it now. And she takes it with her to a shop, and she actually says something along the lines of like, I think people in England are more used to having animals in their shops than we are in the United States, which if that's true, let me know. I would not really think, I would think it would be the other way around, where like Americans would be a little bit more okay with having pets in shops than in the UK, but let me know if I'm wrong. Anyway, so she takes this cat with her, and the cat kind of seems to understand her, and the cat is like picking out her own food. And she names the cat Nix, which I really like. I think that's a cute name. So anyways, as she is in this grocery shop, she sees this man, another attractive man. His name is Ian, and Ian happens to be a police officer. And so she kind of mentions that she's a little bit suspicious about her grandma's death. She doesn't go super into detail, but he seems intrigued by this. And so he's like, call me anytime. And he gives her his number, of course, just for the case, not for any other reason, right? But anyway, so Lucy's like, sure, I will call you sometime and let you know if I need your help. And so Lucy gets back to her apartment after this, and she sees her grandma. Her grandma is there in the flesh. And her grandma seems really disoriented. She doesn't know where she is. She's not wearing her glasses, but she can see Lucy just fine. And Lucy is obviously so confused. And then suddenly this other woman shows up. I think her name is Sylvia. And Sylvia is really rude to Lucy and is like trying to like usher her grandma away from her. And so Lucy is like, oh my gosh, I think this woman might be like a cult leader or something. So Sylvia's like, we need to call Rafe. And Lucy's like, oh, I know Rafe. Let me call him really quick. But she doesn't call Rafe. She calls Ian, the police officer, and is like, something's happening. I need you to come to the yarn shop quick. And so then all of a sudden, Rafe shows up again, and he basically just starts spilling the beans. He's like, Sylvia and I are vampires, and look closely at your grandma's neck. Do you see those bite marks? She's a vampire now too. And he basically says, your grandma knew about us, and she was really kind to us vampires, and now she's a vampire herself, and she lets us use her knitting shop. And Lucy's like, oh my gosh, she lets you use her shop for what? And they were like, knitting, of course. So it's so funny. I love that part. So, of course, Lucy doesn't really believe them. She's like, I don't really, I don't believe in vampires. This is silly, but like something's going on, obviously. And Rafe is like, you cannot tell this police officer man that's coming. You cannot tell him what's going on because he's going to find out about us and it's all just going to be, bad. And so she's like, okay, I won't tell him. Which I'm not really sure why. So she doesn't like Sylvia. Like Sylvia's really rude, but she feels like Rafe is being really kind and genuine and has a good reason for her not to tell the police, I guess. And so when Ian, the detective, shows up, she is like, oh, I'm so sorry. It was just the cat. Nothing's really going on. But he doesn't believe her. Like he seems like he's really suspicious of what's going on and wants to continue looking into the grandma's death. And his detective senses are tingling. He's like, something else is going on here, but she's trying to deny it. So that is basically where we left off. Lucy has decided to stay in England and continue to run this knitting shop. I am going to continue listening to this book. I'm really enjoying it so far. Like I said, the writing style is a little bit silly here and there, but nothing too distracting. And the voice acting is really pretty good. So she actually talks just in a normal American voice when she talks for Lucy, but then she does a British voice for all of the British characters, which I think is really cute and charming. So I'm really enjoying it. I am going to turn it on right now and continue listening as I work on my granny squares here. And I will check in with you guys when I check in with you. But I'm really happy to say I'm enjoying this so far.
Okay, so I am sitting in my driveway right now while I give this update. I was out running errands and then I had to come and drop off some Frozens and I need to get back in the car because I have just a few minutes till I need to go get my daughter. And I thought I'm just going to do a little update while I'm here in the car. But I'm so disappointed because I went into Target because on their app they said that they had a knitting kit. And I am obviously very inspired to learn knitting while reading this book. And I thought that could be a perfect thing for me to review for the channel. It's like an arm knitting thing. I think so. I don't think it's with knitting needles. I think it's with the kind that you do with your arms. I could be wrong about that. But they actually had quite a bit more art kits than they used to. I'm really happy to start seeing more art stuff at Target. But hopefully I will be able to find that knitting kit online and I can review it for the channel. But then I went to Joann and was looking for a specific thing to, again, review for the channel, and they didn't have it. So it was a bad day for me for shopping, but I was enjoying listening to my book while I ran my errands, so that part of it was good. So I am now about 60% of the way into the book. And what has happened is that Lucy, after she found out that there are vampires running amok, she was like, well, I better protect myself. She went very quickly from like, I don't believe them at all to, well, if it is true, I better protect myself and go get some garlic and a crucifix and like something to stab them with if they try to attack me. But she comes back to the shop after doing all of this shopping and she just sees all of the vampires sitting there knitting so peacefully. And she's like, well, I guess they're just kind of normal people. They're not really trying to suck my blood. And they're all really nice to her. And they're all like fighting over who gets to knit a sweater for her, which I thought was really cute. I also really liked that there is a good mixture of both men and women vampire knitters. That is really nice to see some representation. And also, I think it's really funny that they describe they can knit really, really fast. Like their vampire powers let them knit really fast, which is so funny. But she comes in and she's kind of like, well, I want to know what's going on. Why is my grandma a vampire now? And so Sylvia tells her, well, I turned your grandma into a vampire because it was the only way that I could save her. And Lucy initially, it really does not believe Sylvia at all. She's like, I think you just tried to kill her. And that seems like a really weird way to be thinking about it, because if she wanted to kill her, she could have just killed the grandma. Why would she just turn her into a vampire and leave her as a vampire instead of just killing her? It didn't really make any sense why Lucy didn't believe Sylvia, but she just like doesn't like Sylvia on sight. But Sylvia tells her the story of, I came into your grandma's apartment and she was dying on the floor. There was blood everywhere. And I would have tried to call an ambulance, but there was no use. Like by the time they came, she would have been dead. And so I bit her and I turned her into a vampire. She's like, I did see the glimpse of somebody leaving and the grandma had been stabbed. That is how she had been hurt. Somebody had stabbed her. And everybody throughout this entire book has just been like, Agnes was wonderful. She's amazing. Like, who would want to hurt her? So that's kind of where we're at now, is Lucy's trying to figure out who would try to hurt her grandma. And another reveal is that not only are these vampires really nice and kind to her, they also are benevolent vampires because they get all of their blood, all of their food from blood donation drives. And they have a doctor vampire on the inside helping them out with that. So I thought that that was really interesting as well. And I also thought it was funny because one of the characters scoffs at the idea of eating animal blood, which seems like a kind of nod to Twilight. I thought that was really funny. So then in the same conversation that they're having about how the grandma was almost murdered, the cat comes in and the grandma is like, "Oh, Lucy, here's your cat familiar because, by the way, you're a witch." It was like in the same conversation we reveal the grandma was almost murdered and you're a witch. And it was just like, oh my gosh, it's like a whirlwind of information here. And so Lucy, again, is kind of like doubtful, but at the same time, she's like, well, let me test out my skill. So later that day, she like tries to do a spell, but it doesn't go exactly right. And then later on, I can't even remember exactly what happens, but somebody is making her a little bit angry. And she sees the sparks start to come out of her hand again. She's like, oh, so I guess there's something to this that I'm a witch. But why is it that I'm just now finding out that I'm a witch and I'm 28 years old? And the grandma tells her, well, you're just a late bloomer. You're just a late bloomer in life anyway. And so you're just now finding out that you're a witch. But she does mention that it's like a long line of witches. So I wonder if the grandma was a witch too. But then if she was a witch, would it affect her turning into a vampire? I don't really know the lore of all of that yet. But basically where we're at now is that Lucy reopened the shop and is trying to run the shop, even though, again, she doesn't know how to knit. But she has this assistant that does know how to knit that is helping her out. But she doesn't really like the assistant. She's kind of curmudgeon-y, I guess. I don't really know. But I am getting a little bit of the same vibes as I got from the Crochet Mystery series, where it's like women hating women a little bit because she hates Sylvia and she hates this assistant. Her name is Rosemary. So I'm kind of like, oh, I don't really love that. And then she like immediately trusts Rafe, the male vampire. But there is some like cute connections forming with some of the other vampire knitters because they knit her a sweater and like left it as a gift for her. So hopefully there are some more relationships that start to build that are a little bit kinder than what we've seen so far. Because that's something that I really hated about the Crochet Mystery series is there was just so much like woman on woman hate. And I really did not like that vibe. So another reveal that happened, I almost forgot, is that during this whole conversation, this one little conversation where they're all at knitting club, where she finds out that her grandma was almost murdered. She finds out that she's a witch. She also finds out that the vampires all live underneath the shop, like in this like underground lair that they've built down there. And so that's part of the reason why the grandma is like, don't sell the shop. You have to keep it. You have to keep it as a knitting shop because there's vampires living underneath the building. So obviously they don't want anyone else knowing about that. But there is this realty group that keeps coming and talking to Lucy like, oh, you really need to sell the shop. It would be really beneficial for you. So where I'm at now is that she's having a conversation with one of these realty people about possibly selling the shop. So I don't know, but she's like, I can't do that to my vampire friends. Like she is really gone very quickly from like, I don't believe you to I think they want to eat me to now they're my friends. So it is funny. It is very, very quick. Like all of the reveals are coming in. They're coming in hot. So that is where we're at right now. I am really enjoying it. So I would say that my only criticism is that Lucy doesn't really have a whole lot of her own personality. I feel like we constantly hear her say like, well, I'm not a knitter and I don't knit. So it's like we hear what you don't do, but what do you like to do? Like, I feel like she doesn't really have a whole lot of her own personality besides just being Agnes's granddaughter. So hopefully as we go along, she will kind of develop more of a personality and more of interest. And I wonder if she's going to learn to knit during this. As far as the descriptions of like knitting and wool and all of that, I think that's really fun so far. There is descriptions of the different textures of wool that they keep and the different patterns that people are making. So again, I do wonder if Lucy is going to learn eventually. As far as crocheting goes, the only mention I've heard so far is that there was a crochet blanket in the shop, and they do refer to the shop as a knitting shop constantly, but they do occasionally say, and we have stuff for other fiber arts too, or whatever. So we'll see as we go along if we have more representation of crochet. I'm hopeful for that. But like I said, it is definitely inspiring me to want to knit. I actually learned how to knit years and years ago, but I never really picked it back up. I just like crochet more. So we will see if I enjoy that knitting kit from Target once it comes in. I'll keep you updated on that. I will update you when I am a little bit further in.
Okay, update time. I am sick, so I apologize for my even scratchier than normal voice and my no makeup appearance, but I had to give you one last update before my final thoughts on this book. I am 80% of the way in. I have been working on the pattern for this guy, which is my February Patreon pattern, if you're interested. But I'm actually going to take a little break while I talk to you about this book. And by the way, I am going to keep this as spoiler free as possible. But if you don't want to know anything else about this book at all, you may want to click off, but I'm not going to give any overt spoilers. So when we left off, Lucy was talking to this developer about selling the shop. And this developer tells her, I don't just want to buy the knitting shop. I want to buy all of the shops in this block. And I either want to buy all of them or I want to buy none of them. And he keeps telling her that he wants to leave the shop exactly as it is. He's not going to change anything. It's just an investment sort of a thing. And all of the other shop owners want to sell. They want the money. They want to move on, all that kind of stuff. And so they're kind of pressuring Lucy into also selling. And they keep telling her, oh, it's what the grandma would have wanted. But Lucy knows that that's not true. So we're kind of setting up the other shop owners as well as the developers as kind of suspicious characters. Another somewhat suspicious character is Lucy's cousin Violet. So their grandmothers were sisters. So does that make them second cousins? I think that's right. So Lucy had no idea that Violet or her grandma or any of that side of the family even existed, because I guess the sisters had some sort of falling out years ago. And Lucy's grandma never even brought up the fact that she had a sister to her. That side of the family is completely unknown. And that side of the family is also witches. And the reason that this is suspicious is because they find out that this grimoire, this spell book that the grandma had kept in the knitting shop is missing. So now we are a little bit suspicious that the grandma's death had something to do with the grimoire being missing. So we're a little bit suspicious of Violet, and Violet does briefly mention that she has a coven. So I'm kind of interested to see where that is going to go. Another suspicious character is Rosemary, who is the shop assistant that had been working for the grandma for years and years. Well, we find out that her son had been in jail and that he has a drug habit, and that Rosemary had been stealing from the business in order to help out her son. And the grandma didn't mention this to Lucy, and Lucy had no idea, so Lucy hired her back. I don't remember if I said this part, but the grandma's memories are very fuzzy. She doesn't remember the attack at all, and she also doesn't remember the few weeks leading up to the attack. So I will say that that is a very convenient plot device, because if the grandma had her memory, she would know who attacked her. So it does add to the mystery for her to not have her memory, but it is like a little bit convenient, but you know, whatever. So we do find out that Lucy's grandma and mom are both witches. And the reason that Lucy never knew about it is because her mom decided to leave that part of herself in her past. She doesn't want to be a witch anymore, and she doesn't want Lucy knowing anything about it. She made the grandma promise that she wouldn't tell. It's very much giving the mom from Halloween Town, those type of vibes. But Lucy, you know, she's a little bit upset about this. Like, you know, this is a whole side of myself that I didn't know. And the grandma's like, you know what? Grimoire or no grimoire, I'm going to start teaching you a little bit of magic. And then there's this really cute scene where she's teaching her to do some spells by rearranging the shop. Oh, Lily, you're going to come join me? Lily wanted to join me, I guess, for this part of the review. So there is this really cute scene where the grandma is teaching Lucy magic by rearranging the shop. So there's like wool flying everywhere. And it's a really sweet scene. I really liked that. And in that scene, they do talk about a crochet hook. So there is crochet stuff in the shop. I have some hope that there's going to be some more crochet rep as we go along. Sorry, the mailman came and that was very traumatic for Lily. So anyway, a couple of days later, Lucy is in the shop and it is a Sunday. The shop is closed. She's in there doing inventory when suddenly she is attacked from behind and completely knocked out. And when she wakes up, Rafe is there, Rafe the vampire man. And he's like, Nyx came to get me. What is going on? Are you okay? And she's like, I don't know. I was knocked out. And then suddenly the police show up and they find a dead body in the back room. I'm not going to tell you who it was, but they do find someone in the back room. So the plot thickens. We are trying to figure out what that death has to do with the grandma's death, if anything. And so they're setting up all of these different suspicious characters. So we don't really know what is going on at this point. But they are definitely setting up a love triangle because in the scene where Lucy wakes up, we have Rafe and then we have Ian, the detective, and they're both very protective of her. And so, yeah, they're definitely setting up a love triangle, which I think is kind of cute and fun. But I mean, if I had to choose between a vampire and a cop, the choice is obvious. Let's just say that. So I only have about 20% of this book left. So I will listen to the rest of this and then I will come back for my final thoughts. But I still am really enjoying this book. I think it's really fun. I do love the cozy atmosphere. I feel like we are starting to get a little bit more of Lucy's personality as we go along. She does talk about how she went to business school. And so the business side of running the shop, she's actually really interested in. It's just the knitting part that she's kind of like, I don't know. But she did mention that she is inspired to learn to knit. So hopefully that is what happens as the series goes on, is that she learns how to knit and crochet. I would love if she would learn how to crochet, but I'm not going to get my hopes up for that. But anyway, I will check in with you guys hopefully tomorrow for my final thoughts on this book. Okay, so it is a few days later. As you saw, we got a couple of fun snow days and the kids were off school. But during that time, I did finish the Vampire Knitting Club. I can't say really anything else about the plot without spoiling it. But what I can say is that I loved it. Thank you so much to everyone who recommended this to me because I really enjoyed it. It basically ticked every box for me. It was cozy, took place in a yarn shop. There was fun characters. There was an animal companion. And I mean, the vampires really are just the icing on the cake. The mystery did wrap up, so it doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger or anything like that. But it does definitely set you up for the next book in the series, mostly by talking about how Lucy wants to continue learning more about her witch powers. And like I said, they are definitely setting up a love triangle. Although there was not really much that happened there. There was one little cute moment between Lucy and one of the love interests, which I won't spoil for you, but you can tell that that is what they are going for, is a cute little love triangle. My one tiny critique would be that I really wish that you got a little bit more character development and a little bit more of the relationship between the characters. However, I know that this is a series, so I can kind of forgive it for that because this book seemed to be really a whole lot of setup. And I'm assuming as we go along, we will get more character development. We will get kind of more relationship dynamics. And I really like to see those kind of things in books. So I hope that that does happen as we continue the series. And I can kind of forgive that for it being book one in a series. There's also really not a whole lot of explanation of the lore of the witches and the vampires yet either. I'm assuming we will get more of that as we go along. We will see. I will definitely be continuing this series, and you guys will have to let me know if you want me to make more videos on it. Reading really is my other true love besides crochet, and so finding a way to combine those two things by making a video really makes me so happy. So just let me know if you want me to make more videos on this, because I would absolutely love to. Hopefully we see more crochet representation as the series goes on. Like I said, book 3 is called Crochet in Cauldrons, so I have some hope for that. But the knitting definitely has me intrigued. Maybe 2025 is the year I get back into knitting. We will see. But thank you so much for watching this video. And as always, if you've made it to this part, let me know, what were you working on as you watched today's video? If you did like today's video, be sure to hit the like button. You can subscribe, stick around. Let me know what other kind of videos you want to see next. You can also join my Patreon, where I make a bonus video as well as an exclusive pattern once a month. And thank you again for watching. I'll see you next time.